Picture the scene. It's April 7th, 1947. We're on the grounds of the Fairlane Estate in Dearborn, Michigan. It's this, massive limestone mansion built to look like a Scottish castle, the home of one of the wealthiest men in history. But if you look inside, the whole atmosphere's, well, it's just completely wrong. It's eerie.
It really is. The Rouge River, which is right by the estate, has completely flooded its banks. It's a massive deluge.
And the power's out.
The power's out. The flood knocked out the estate's private hydroelectric plant, so the lights are dead, the heat is off, even the phone lines are down.
And in a bedroom, lying there in the dark, is Henry Ford. He's 83 years old, and he's dying.
And this is the part that, it's an irony that just gives you chills.
Yeah, it really makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Yeah.
This is the man who basically electrified the modern world. His best friend was Thomas Edison.
The father of the light bulb.
He built the infrastructure of the modern age, and yet he is leaving this world in a cold room lit only by kerosene lamps and some flickering candles.
It's this poetic symmetry that you almost couldn't write. It would feel too heavy-handed in a novel.
Right.
Henry Ford came into the world in 1863, born in a farmhouse with no electricity, and he leaves it in almost the exact same conditions. But in those 83 years in between, he completely rewrote the operating system of human society.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into the life of Henry Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for most people, the name it's a word association, right? Model T.
Assembly line? Maybe just cars?
Cars, yeah. But when you look at the research, the story is just infinitely more complicated than just a car.
It is. We're not just talking about a mechanic or a CEO. We're talking about really the architect of the 20th century. But the thing that really leaps off the page in all the sources is the central thesis of the man of contradictions. Ford wasn't just complex. He was a walking paradox.
Oh, absolutely. The cognitive dissonance is, it's off the treats. You have a man who was a staunch vocal pacifist. He famously chartered a peace ship to try and stop World War I. But his factories then go on to build the B-24 bombers that flattened cities in World War II.
Exactly. And then you have the man who famously paid the highest wages in industrial history, the $5 day, which made him this hero to the working class.
A total hero.
But he also hired literal thugs, ex-boxers and ex-convicts, to beat the living daylights out of anyone who even tried to join a union.
And maybe the most difficult one to wrap your head around, a technological visionary who created the modern city, who created the middle class.
Yeah.
Yet he hated the modern city. He absolutely hated it.
He spent his millions trying to recreate the quiet, slow farm life that his own inventions helped destroy.
Well, we have to address the elephant in the room.
We do. The philanthropist who built hospitals and museums, but also published some of the most virulent, damaging anti-Semitic propaganda of the modern era.
It's heavy stuff, and we aren't going to shy away from any of it. Our mission today is to figure out how this farm boy who hated farming managed to build the world we all live in, and why his legacy is still so difficult to grapple with.
So let's rewind the clock.
Let's go back to the beginning, 1863, Springwells Township, Michigan.
This is rural America in its rawest form. His father, William Ford, was an Irish immigrant, a pretty prosperous farmer, and his mother, Mary Lydigot Ford, was the absolute glue of the family.
And young Henry, he's born into a world of just physical drudgery.
And the sources are so clear about this. He hated it.
He really did.
It wasn't just a kid's dislike of chores. He had this fundamental philosophical disdain for how inefficient farm work was. He just called it drudgery.
He has that famous quote, "I never had any particular love for the farm. It was the mother on the farm I loved."
And that distinction is so crucial to his psychology. He loved his mother, but he saw the work itself as this total waste of human energy. He was looking for a better way, from day one.
He was a tinkerer.
Absolutely. There's this great story in the notes where at 13, he gets a pocket watch.
And for a normal kid, a watch is a prized possession. You polish it, you check the time. What does Henry do?
He immediately takes it apart, just completely disassembles it, and then he puts it back together perfectly.
Wow.
He becomes this little neighborhood watch repairman.
Yeah.
But his father, he wants him farming, so Henry has to do all this in secret at night.
And he doesn't have the right tools.
No proper tools, so he's making his own screwdrivers out of sharpened shingle nails and get this tweezers out of old corset stays.
That is it's resourceful, but it also shows a real level of obsession. He's looking at the mechanism of the world and trying to figure out how to optimize it.
But the real turning point, the moment that really severs him from the land, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, 1876. His mother, Mary, dies.
And Ford was devastated. He later described the house as a watch without a mainspring.
That is such a telling metaphor for a mechanic to use.
It is. Without her, the farm held nothing for him. That emotional connection was it was gone. So in 1879, he leaves. He literally walks to Detroit.
That's the equivalent of running away to join the circus, but the circus is the Industrial Revolution.
Precisely. He becomes an apprentice machinist. He bounces around a few different shops, James Flower and Bros, the Detroit Dry Dock Company. He's just absorbing everything he can about mechanics.
And there's this specific aha moment, the sources mention. He's out on a road and he sees a vehicle.
A Westinghouse portable steam engine.
Right, which were usually pulled by horses, right, to a farm to help with threshing.
Exactly. But this one was moving under its own power. It was loud, heavy, puffing smoke. For most kids, that's just a noisy machine. For Henry Ford, it was a revelation.
Because he realized that flesh and bone weren't necessary.
Exactly. Machinery can do the work of men and horses. That moment is the seed of everything that comes later.
He eventually marries Clara Bryant in 1888. And we should really note, Clara is a huge character here. She is the believer.
She is. She supports him when everyone else just thinks he's crazy.
And they think he's crazy because he gets this great job at the Edison Illuminating Company in Detroit, works his way up to chief engineer by 1893. He's making decent money, but he's not sleeping.
No. He's spending his nights in a shed behind his house on Bagley Avenue just building something.
The kitchen table engine.
This is legendary. It's Christmas Eve, 1893. Everyone else is probably celebrating. Henry Ford has clamped a one-cylinder gas engine to his wife's kitchen sink.
Just picture that for a second. It's Christmas Eve, the smell of gasoline in the kitchen, the noise.
And Claire is right there with him. She has to drip the gasoline into the intake valve while he spins the flywheel to get it started. It's a total partnership.
And it worked.
It worked. The engine sputtered to life. And that proof of concept, that leads to the quadricycle in 1896.
His first car, though, car is being generous.
It is. It's basically a frame mounted on 4 bicycle wheels. It had a tiller to steer like a boat, 2 gears, and crucially, no brakes.
And no reverse. And the best part of the story is the door.
Yes. He finishes it at 4 a.m. It's pouring rain. He wants to take it for a test drive. And he realizes the thing is wider than the door of the shed.
A classic engineering oversight.
So what does he do? He doesn't take it apart. He grabs an axe and smashes down the brick wall of the shed to get the car out.
That's Henry Ford in a nutshell. If there's a wall in your way, you don't go around it.
You smash it.
Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. He's a nobody at this point. Just another tinker in a shed. But he goes to a convention for the Edison Illuminating Company, and he meets the man himself, Thomas Edison.
This is such a pivotal moment. It's like a young garage coder meeting Steve Jobs in the 70s.
Totally.
And Ford is shy. He's in the background, but someone introduces him as the young fellow who's made a gas car. Edison, who is nearly deaf at this point, cups his ear and asks about the mechanism. He asks specifically about the explosion in the cylinder.
Because everyone else was betting on steam or electricity, gas was seen as dangerous and loud.
Right. So Ford sketches it out, probably on a napkin or a menu, and Edison looks at it and he bangs his fist on the table and he says, "Young man, that's the thing. You have it. The electric car is dead weight. Keep at it."
Keep at it. That validation from the greatest inventor on Earth must have been like rocket fuel for him.
It was everything. And this is something people tend to forget, he didn't just succeed immediately after that. We tend to skip straight from there to the Model T.
But he actually failed twice.
He did. Let's dig into that, because usually the story is just genius invents car, gets rich, but the reality was way messier.
So what happened first?
First, there was the Detroit Automobile Company in 1899. Ford got investors, he quit his job at Edison, and he started building. But he was a perfectionist. He kept tinkering with the prototypes.
He wouldn't sell them.
He wouldn't approve the cars for sale because they weren't perfect yet. And, investors hate that. They want a return on their investment.
They want to sell units.
Exactly. So they got angry and they dissolved the company. Then came the Henry Ford Company in 1901. Same problem. He clashed with the investors, especially a man named William Murphy. Ford wanted to build a better car. They just wanted to sell cars now.
So he was ousted?
Essentially, yeah. He left. And this is a great piece of trivia. What happened to that company after Ford was gone?
Oh, this is good.
The investors brought in a precision machinist named Henry Leland to appraise the factory, sell off the scraps. Leland looked at the engine Ford had left behind and said, "I can make a car out of this." And that company became Cadillac.
So Henry Ford accidentally started his biggest competitor, Cadillac, by getting fired.
Wait.
That's wild.
It is. But now Ford is 40 years old. In 1902, 40 is old to be starting over. He's got this reputation in Detroit as a guy who just can't deliver. He needs money and he needs buzz.
So he does something that seems totally out of character.
He goes racing.
The logic being, win on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Exactly. He builds a monster. The 999, this wasn't a car. It was basically an engine on wheels. 80 horsepower engine, no differential, no suspension. It was a death trap.
And Ford was terrified of it.
He was. He hires a professional bicycle racer named Barney Oldfield to drive it.
And Oldfield had never even driven a car before.
Right. But he was brave, or maybe just crazy. They enter the Manufacturers Challenge Cup. They win. They set records. And suddenly, the cash comes flowing back in.
And that attracts Alexander Malcolmson, a coal dealer, and a few others. And in 1903, the Ford Motor Company is born. But this time, Ford has a very different vision.
He doesn't want to build race cars. He doesn't want to build luxury carriages for the rich, which is what pretty much everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
He wants to build a car for the multitude.
The Model T, 1908. The Tin Lizzie.
This car changed the world. And it wasn't just because it was cheap. It was because of how it was made and what it was made of. The sources all highlight something called vanadium steel.
Yeah, let's unpack that. It sounds like something out of a comic book. What is it?
Well, Ford had seen a crashed French race car, and he noticed that some of the steel parts hadn't broken. They had just bent. So he analyzed a shard of the metal and found it was a vanadium alloy. Super high strength, but also lightweight. Nobody in America knew how to make it.
So he figured it out.
He found a metallurgist and spent a fortune figuring out how to produce it.
And why was that so important?
You have to remember, American roads in 1908 weren't roads. They were mud pits, wagon trails, rocky paths. A heavy, brittle luxury car would snap an axle in a week.
But the Model T could handle it.
The Model T, thanks to that vanadium steel, was light and flexible. It could twist. It was like an early ATV. And it was simple.
Incredibly simple.
If it broke, you could fix it with a hammer and a wrench. You didn't need a certified mechanic. This opened up the car to farmers, to people who lived far away from cities.
But the demand.
Yeah.
It was just too high. They couldn't build them fast enough.
Right. At this point, they were still building cars like houses. The car sits in one spot and workers bring parts to it. It's incredibly slow.
So, enter the slaughterhouse inspiration.
I love this detail. It's so gruesome, but so brilliant.
It is.
Ford's team went to the Swift & Co. meatpacking plants in Chicago.
Yeah.
And they just watched the process. Cows would come in on these overhead trolleys. The workers stood still. One guy removed a hoof. The next guy removed the hide. It was a disassembly line.
And Ford just asked, what if we run it in reverse?
Exactly.
Oh.
1913, the Highland Park plant. The birth of the moving assembly line. They put the chassis on a rope, later a chain, and just pulled it past the workers.
And the impact of this on speed is hard to even wrap your head around.
Oh, the stats are staggering. Before the line, it took 12 and a half hours to build one chassis.
12 and a half hours.
With the line, 93 minutes.
Wow.
Eventually, they were rolling a finished Model T off the line every 24 seconds.
That is just an exponential leap in productivity.
Yeah.
And because of that speed, the economics completely changed.
The price just plummeted, from over $850 down to under $300 by the 1920s. For the first time in history, a complex machine was actually affordable to the average person.
But if, and there is always a but with Henry Ford, this efficiency came at a human cost.
A massive cost. And this leads us to the next big contradiction. You have this hyper-efficient machine, but now you have a human problem. The work on the assembly line was terrible.
How so?
It was repetitive, it was boring, and it was relentless. You couldn't stop. You were just a cog in the machine. A man might spend 9 hours a day just tightening nut number 14. That does something to the human mind.
And the workers hated it.
They quit in droves. In 1913, the turnover rate was 380%.
380?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That means to keep a workforce of 100 men, Ford had to hire nearly 400 men a year. It was chaos. The efficiency of the line was being completely eaten up by the cost of hiring and training.
So Ford drops a bomb on the industrial world. January 5th, 1914, the $5 day.
He doubles the standard wage overnight. The average pay was about $2.34. He makes it $5. And this is crucial. He cuts the workday from 9 hours to 8 hours.
Wall Street thought he was completely insane. The Wall Street Journal called it an economic crime. They thought he'd bankrupt the company.
But people went nuts. 10,000 men stormed the gates of the Highland Park plant the next day looking for work, and Ford suddenly had his pick of the best mechanics, the strongest workers in the world. Turnover just vanished overnight.
But there was a deeper logic here, wasn't there? This is the social engineer part of Ford coming out.
Yes. He realized that mass production requires mass consumption. If you build 1 million cars, you need 1 million people who can buy them. By paying his workers enough to afford the product they were making, he essentially jump-started the American middle class. He created his own market.
But here comes the catch.
Yeah.
And it is a big one. The $5 wasn't a guaranteed wage.
No. The base pay was still around $2.30. The rest of it was profit sharing. And to qualify for that profit sharing, you had to meet Henry Ford's moral standards.
Enter the sociological department. This sounds like something out of a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It was incredibly invasive. Ford employed investigators, basically social workers with badges, who would physically go to their workers' homes. They interviewed the wives. They checked for alcohol consumption. They checked if the house was clean.
They checked marital status.
If you were living with a woman you weren't married to, you lose the money. If you had boarders staying with you to make extra cash, that's a strike against you.
Yeah.
Ford wanted privacy for the family. If you were spending your money frivolously instead of saving, strike.
So you had to be a good American to get your money. And speaking of being a good American, we have to talk about the melting pot.
The Americanization program. Ford's workforce was largely immigrant, over 50 nationalities, Poles, Italians, Russians, Hungarians, and Ford required them to attend the Ford English School.
Which, on the surface, that sounds helpful. Learning the language is good for safety and integration.
True. But the graduation ceremony, you have to visualize this to believe it. They built a giant prop on a stage, a huge wooden melting pot.
Paint the picture for us.
The workers would walk down a gangplank into this pot, wearing their traditional ethnic clothing, carrying their old world luggage. Teachers would stand there with these giant ladles, pretending to stir the pot.
And then the workers would emerge from the other side.
Transformed. They'd walk out wearing standard American business suits, waving little American flags, having been melted down and recast as American.
It implies a total erasure of their past identity. You're not Polish anymore. You are a Ford man.
It's impressive in its scope, but it's terrifying in its implications. He's trying to manufacture men the same way he manufactures cars. Standardization.
Precisely. And this need for control, this belief that he knew what was best for the world, better than the people living in it, this leads us into the darkest parts of his legacy.
Because if you believe you have the moral authority to tell men how to live, what happens when you decide a certain group of people is the enemy?
We're talking about his anti-Semitism. And the sources here are very clear. We're not talking about some casual prejudice that was common at the time. This was an active crusade.
It was systematic and it was global. In 1918, Ford bought a local newspaper, the Dearborn Independent. He didn't run it as a business. He ran it as his personal mouthpiece. He actually required every Ford dealership in the country to distribute it.
And he used it to publish a series called The International Jew.
Yes. He published the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was a known forgery even back then. He spread the conspiracy theory that Jewish people controlled the world's financial systems, that they were responsible for wars, for jazz music, for short skirts. Anything Ford hated about the modern world, he blamed on the International Jew.
And because it was Henry Ford saying it, the man who invented the future, people listened.
The impact was horrific. Hitler admired Ford. He had a life-size portrait of Ford in his office in Munich. In Mein Kampf, Ford is the only American singled out for praise. Hitler literally said, "I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration."
That is a connection that
yeah.
It lands so heavy. To think that the man who built the American arsenal of democracy was also an inspiration to the Nazis.
And Ford even accepted the Grand Cross of the German Eagle in 1938, a Nazi medal, for his 75th birthday. Now, to be fair to the historical record, he did eventually issue a retraction and an apology after he was sued by a lawyer named Aaron Shapiro. But most historians agree he probably didn't write the apology himself, and by then the damage was already done. The propaganda he printed is still circulated today by hate groups.
It just shows how dangerous his certainty was. He was so sure he was right about the assembly line that he thought he was infallible about sociology and race.
And he was just as stubborn about his own workers. He hated unions with a passion.
It seems so odd for the guy who introduced the $5 day.
Not if you understand his worldview. He saw himself as the father figure. I gave you the $5 day. I know what's best for you. He viewed unions as an interference, an ungrateful third party coming between a father and his children.
So he hired Harry Bennett.
Harry Bennett. The sources describe him like a movie villain.
Yeah.
He was an ex-boxer, a tough guy, completely uneducated in business, but he was loyal. Ford put him in charge of the service department.
Which sounds so benign, like customer service.
It was a private police force. Bennett hired spies, ex-convicts, and thugs to patrol the factories. They ruled by fear. If you were caught even talking about a union, you got fired, or worse, you got beaten up in the parking lot.
And this leads to the Battle of the Overpass in 1937.
A seminal moment in labor history. Walter Reuther and other UAW United Auto Workers organizers were lawfully handing out leaflets on a pedestrian overpass near the River Rouge plant. They weren't blocking traffic, they weren't being violent.
But Bennett's men were there.
They attacked the organizers, they pulled their coats over their heads so they couldn't fight back and just beat them bloody, threw them down concrete stairs, and crucially, it was all caught on camera.
The photos went everywhere.
It was a PR disaster. It totally shattered Ford's image as the friend of the working man. But Ford still wouldn't sign a contract. He held out until 1941. He was the last of the big three automakers to unionize.
And do you know who finally made him stop?
His wife.
Clara.
The believer.
The woman who dripped the gas into the kitchen sink engine. She told him that if he didn't sign the contract and end the violence, she would leave him. She would divorce him.
And that was the only authority Henry Ford respected.
That is incredible, isn't it? The man who stood up to Wall Street, the government, and the unions folded because his wife drew a line in the sand.
It really speaks to his isolation, I think. By this time, the 30s and 40s, he's surrounded by yes men like Bennett. He's alienated his executives. He's alienated his son. Let's talk about Edsel, because this is the family tragedy at the heart of the story. If Henry is the King Lear of the story, Edsel is the tragic prince.
Edsel Ford was named president of the company in 1919 when he was just 25. But Henry never really let go of the reins.
Never. And they were complete opposites. Edsel was gentle, artistic, sophisticated. He collected art. He wanted cars to be beautiful and comfortable. Henry was a pure utilitarian. He just wanted the car to be a tool.
And Henry bullied him.
Relentlessly. The sources are just heartbreaking on this. Henry thought Edsel was too soft, so he would publicly undermine him to toughen him up. He would countermand Edsel's orders in front of employees. He would build up Edsel's projects and then just tear them down.
And the biggest conflict was over the Model T. Right?
Oh, yes. The Model T was great in 1908. But by the mid-1920s, it was ancient technology. It was loud, slow, ugly. Chevy and GM were making cars that looked better, had electric starters, and came in different colors.
And Edsel saw the sales dropping.
He said, "Dad, we need a new car." And Henry just said no.
He refused.
He loved the T. He thought it was the perfect car. He refused to change for years, and sales just plummeted. GM took the lead in market share, finally. Henry gave in. But because they had waited so long, they had to shut down the entire factory for months to retool for the new car.
Which was the Model A.
The Model A. And it was a great car. Edsel designed the body, and it was beautiful like a little Lincoln. Henry designed the engine. It was a huge hit when it launched in 1927, but the delay had cost them their dominance. GM became the #1 automaker, and Ford never really got that spot back.
And the stress of that dynamic. It must have taken a terrible toll on Edsel.
He developed stomach cancer and ulcers. He died in 1943 at the age of 49. It was a tragedy. And many people close to the family believed the stress and the heartbreak caused by his father directly contributed to his early death.
And Henry was shattered by it.
He was. He genuinely loved his son, but in a way, he had broken him.
And yet, even in his decline, even after Edsel's death, Ford pulls off one last miracle. World War II.
The arsenal of democracy. This brings us to Willow Run.
Which is fascinating, because Ford was a pacifist. He didn't want war. But when the war came, he committed the company to the effort.
The government needed bombers. The B-24 Liberator. These were massive four-engine planes with hundreds of thousands of parts. Before this, planes were built one by craftsmen. It was incredibly slow.
And Ford said, I can build them like cars.
Charles Sorensen, Ford's production genius, they called him Cast Iron Charlie, famously sketched out a production line on a napkin in a hotel room. They promised the government they could build one bomber an hour.
Which the aviation expert said was completely impossible.
They laughed at him. A car has, what, maybe 15,000 parts? A B-24 has 450,000 parts? But Ford built a factory at Willow Run, the largest factory under one roof in the world at the time.
But it wasn't smooth sailing.
No, it was a disaster at first. Critics called it Will It Run. They had all kinds of trouble with labor, housing, technical issues, but they just applied that assembly line logic. They made dies to stamp out parts instead of hand-forming them, and they figured it out.
And did they hit the target? 1 an hour.
They beat it. At peak production, Willow Run was spitting out a massive flight-ready bomber every 63 minutes. It's arguably one of the greatest industrial feats in history. That sheer volume of production just overwhelmed the Axis powers.
But Henry himself, he wasn't really running the show by the end of the war, was he?
No. After Edsel died in 43, Henry took the presidency back. But he was senile, he was paranoid, he'd had strokes. Harry Bennett was practically running the company, and he was dragging it into the ground. They were losing $10 million a month.
Wow.
The government was actually debating taking over the company because it was so vital to the war effort.
So we have a coup, a family succession drama.
The women stepped in again, Edsel's widow, Eleanor, and Clara. Eleanor told Henry that if he didn't hand the company over to her son, his grandson, Henry Ford II, she would sell her stock. And that stock was the only thing keeping the company in the family.
So Henry Ford II, the deuce, takes over.
He was young, only 28, takes over in 1945. And the first thing he does, he fires Harry Bennett, he cleans house, he saves the company.
And Henry Ford, the founder, retires to Fairlane. He spends his last days at Greenfield Village.
Which brings us right back to that contradiction. Greenfield Village was his outdoor museum. He bought up old farmhouses, the Wright brothers' cycle shop, Edison's lab, and moved them all to Michigan. He created a sanctuary of the 19th century rural life.
The very life that he destroyed with the Model T.
It suggests a deep regret, or at least a confusion. He loved the slow pace of the horse and buggy world, but he was the one who made it obsolete. He spent his fortune preserving the past that his own invention had erased.
And that brings us back to the night of April 7th, 1947. The flood. The candles.
He died that night, in the dark, surrounded by the flicker of candlelight, just like in the farmhouse where he was born.
So when you look at the whole legacy, how do you even sum it up? It seems impossible to just label him good or bad.
You can't. You have to hold two opposing thoughts in your head at once. He liberated the common person from isolation. Before the car, your world was a 5-mile radius around your farm. He destroyed that isolation. He created the weekend by making production so efficient we didn't have to work on Sundays. He created the middle-class wage. But he also unleashed forces we're still grappling with. Industrial sprawl, pollution, the alienation of assembly line work, corporate control over private life. And, the stain of anti-Semitism.
It raises that question. Was he a victim of his own success?
In a way. He built a machine, both the car and the company, that moved faster than he could. He started as a tinkerer trying to save farmers from drudgery, and he ended up creating a world so complex and fast-paced that even he couldn't keep up with it. He tried to control everything, his workers, his son, his timeline, but the future he invented just ran away from him.
That is a lot to process. The man who put the world on wheels couldn't stop the ride.
That is the perfect way to put it.
Well, there's so much more to see and understand about these industrial giants. Reading about it is one thing, but if you want to really get it, you need to see the machines. You need to see the rouge.
Absolutely. Go to the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, seeing the quadricycle, seeing the massive steam engines, standing on the floor of the factory. It just changes your perspective completely. It makes the history real.
If you want to explore more stories of the titans who built and sometimes broke our world, make sure to subscribe to the History Titans channel. Like this video and share it with a friend who thinks they know the whole story.
There is always more to the story.
Always. Thanks for diving in with us.